So really the main message this spring hasn't changed a whole lot since the last spring flood outlook. We're still looking at a near normal risk for flooding across the region, for spring snowmelt flooding, that is. We still are seeing a slightly elevated potential for flooding over northeast Iowa and southwest Wisconsin. We still have some pretty deep snowpack in those areas, and we have only added to that since our last briefing. We are starting to melt some of that snowpack, but not a lot is running off yet. So that snow is still kind of in its ripening stage yet, but the southern edge of the snowfield to our south is starting to shrink considerably. So we're going to continue to melt that over the next 1 to 2 weeks here. So factors for this year's near normal snowmelt flood risk, really we just saw that overall drier pattern. Kind of even started later last summer, continued into the fall and even into this winter. So those saturated soils that we had across the region following the heavy precipitation of 2018 to 2019, the soils really got a chance to recover from that, and stream flow values as well. So soils have dried out considerably since then, and our stream levels have returned to closer to normal levels for much of the area, with the exception of where ice may be impacting some of those stream levels. We had some early winter rain and a few rounds of heavier snow across northeast Iowa and southwest Wisconsin. So that's what's nudging that flood risk up just a little bit across those areas. And as always, the flood risk depends on future precipitation and temperature trends. You know, it might look like we're in good shape now, but then if we start getting heavy rains as we get into the spring, especially as the snowmelt crest comes through our area or comes through your basin, start getting heavy rain on top of that, things can change. So continue to monitor the latest information. So just kind of to review the checklist here, what goes into the spring flooding risk. We'll review that here today. We look at river levels, soil moisture, winter precipitation, kind of what are our conditions going into the winter and then during the winter, snowpack liquid equivalent, rate of the snowmelt, frost depth, spring temperatures, and spring precipitation. And really, out of all those factors, those are all pretty much in what we'd consider normal, or not an anomalous value, except kind of the wild cards we have yet are the spring temperatures and spring precipitation. Our ground is still frozen. We have added to that frost depth just a bit since our last briefing. That prolonged a couple of weeks of cold that we had here earlier in February did drive the frost a little bit deeper into the ground, but we don't anticipate that having a significant impact on the flood risk for this spring. So what we'll have to watch carefully as we go through the late winter here and into the spring months are temperature trends and precipitation. If we start to warm up and accelerate the runoff and melting of the snow, that could cause some issues. And also if we start getting into a wetter pattern, which there is the slight chance of that as we are under La Nina conditions. So stream flow conditions, not a lot has changed there either. Still kind of in that normal range. And just kind of showing a couple of graphics here. The upper left is the average over the last 45 days that's an average stream flow index. That's taking a look at all the USGS river gauges, a total of 261 sites across the entire basin. So really no values there indicating wet or dry conditions. We're just kind of hovering around normal. The lower left graphic is looking back all the way to 1999, just the trends that we've had over the years. You can see a lot of rises, a lot of falls on that graphic. We've had some wet years and some dry years. But if you focus on towards the end, you can see we're certainly into a drier pattern or a near normal stream flow value pattern coming out of those wet years that we had the previous couple of years and even before that. The image on the right breaks it down basin by basin. That's looking at average stream flow based on a percentile class over the last 28 days. So anywhere where you're seeing green values, those are values that are closer to normal. There are even some basins that are a little bit on the lower side, but overall we're right around normal for this time of year. Surface soil moisture conditions, not a lot of change there. Still kind of right in that what we consider a normal range. This is looking at the percentile rankings across the region. There are a couple of pockets with wetter soil conditions across portions of eastern Iowa into southwest and east central Wisconsin. So have to watch those areas a little more closely here to see if that wet pattern continues. And those areas could have somewhat of an enhanced risk for maybe a little more runoff than those drier areas. So taking a look at snowfall so far, we're not anticipating adding a whole lot to this over the next week or so. Again, the snowpack has started to come down a bit in some areas. At least we're ripening the snowpack. But we still have an appreciable amount of snow across northeast Iowa and southwest Wisconsin, where there's anywhere from 8 to 15 inches plus in some of those areas. And that's basically impacting areas mainly south of Interstate 90. To the north, snowpack is considerably less, generally running around 5 inches or less until you get into the far north. And even in those areas, those brighter colors, once you get into the snowbelt regions of Lake Superior and into northern Minnesota, even those values are considerably below normal for this time of year. So looking at the right image on the right side of the slide here, that's the accumulated snowfall percent of mean for the entire season. So you kind of want values in those kind of whitish to light greenish. That's more typical for normal snowfall levels across the region. And it's a little bit deceiving. It's been considerably below normal the last couple of months. A lot of the snowfall for the entire season fell early in the year in October, if you recall some of those snow events that we had. So it is considerably below normal for areas across Minnesota, much of Wisconsin. It's really when you get into Iowa, northern Illinois, and far southern Wisconsin that's seen much more snowfall this year. So it's not just about the snow depth, it's how much liquid is in the snow. That's what's really important. And not a whole lot of change there. We did add a little bit to that liquid with a couple of snow events that we've had since our last briefing. But we're still sitting in that generally half-inch to around an inch of liquid for areas along and north of Interstate 90. That's across the local area. And then south in that deeper snowpack, there's about 1 to 3 inches plus, even some isolated pockets of about 4.5 inches of liquid in that snow. So hopefully we can continue this slow release of the liquid that's in that snowpack, especially in those areas. Frost depth across the region, generally in that 5 to 16 inch range across the local area. And again, this is a little bit of an increase from where we were at during the last briefing due to those cold temperatures earlier in February. But once again, we're not expecting this to significantly increase the spring snowmelt flooding potential. So now let's move ahead to kind of an extended climate outlook here. We'll look out through the first week in March, and then we'll look out for the next few months. This is from the Climate Prediction Center, and we are anticipating above normal temperatures. There's a pretty strong signal for that. These are probabilities for below, near normal, or above temperatures and precipitation for that matter. But there's a pretty strong signal that we'll continue to see above normal temperatures for the next couple of weeks here. And as far as precipitation goes, looks like we're going to stay on the drier side. There's a pretty good signal there as well for us to continue with below normal precipitation. Now let's look out through the entire month of March. And really there isn't a strong signal either way for temperatures to say if we're going to be above or below. So we're calling that equal chances. So there really isn't a signal there, except for in our south, there's a slight chance, I would call it, to maybe a chance of above normal temperatures. Precipitation-wise, kind of the same story. We could be entering a period where there's a slight increase for above normal precipitation. That's mainly being driven by that La Nina pattern that we're in. So we'll have to watch that more closely. But the stronger signal for that is kind of off to our east into the eastern Great Lakes region and Ohio River Valley. Now let's look out even further. This is looking from March, April, May, our 3-month outlook. And basically it's kind of the same story. Just seeing potential there for a slight chance of above normal temperatures across our local area, and the same story for precipitation. So let's just take a look at the long-range probabilities. This is a map indicating where there is a chance, 50% chance or greater of a particular flood category being reached through an extended period, and I'll get into that. This is looking all the way out into May. We do have a couple of sites that do have kind of a somewhat of an increased chance for potential flooding, and I'll touch on that here briefly. And those are across northeast Iowa and southwest Wisconsin. So that's mainly we're looking at the Turkey River Basin and the Kickapoo River Basin. And of course, when we get into Grant County, we have a couple of spots that flood more frequently with spring snowmelt. We'll have to watch those areas as well. Those aren't included on this graphic, but those are the Grant and Platte Rivers in Grant County. So really, this is what this is telling us, this graphic. There's a near normal risk. And again, that the Turkey River at Spillville, that's our only red dot on the map. That has a 56% chance of reaching moderate flood stage. But to put that into perspective, historically, this location on any given year, looking back at the historical database, has about a 36% chance of reaching moderate flood stage. So that's why we're categorizing that area as having a slight increase, slightly above normal risk for spring snowmelt flooding. So again, if you're interested in looking at this probability and long-range information that we base our spring snowmelt flooding outlooks off of, I'll just go over a brief review here where you can find that. If you go to water.weather.gov, or you can get to this off of our local homepage as well, click on long-range flood risk, and that will bring up basically the map that I just showed you. And we have that. You can select the different percentiles for chances of exceeding a river flood, and defaults to 50%, and that's what I had just shown. So you can change that as well. And that will give you your flood categories on the right for your legend. So let's take a look at a particular site here. I'll just, for an example, I'll pick the midpoint. Let's look at the Mississippi River at La Crosse. And once you open up that graphic, you can go to probability information. And then if you'd like to see the chance of exceeding levels during this outlook period, click on that link. And this will open up a graphic for you. This is the latest for the Mississippi River at La Crosse. And this graphic is showing the chance of exceeding a river stage. And that's for any river stage. The river stages are given on the left, and then we have our flood categories highlighted on the graphic. And then the probability of exceeding that stage is given on the lower part of the graphic. And the lines are the blue trace is the historical simulation, so that's what we would typically see based on historic values, and then we put in the conditions across the area for this year, this season in the basin, and that gives us the black trace. So when the black trace is close to that blue trace, that's a near normal flood risk. When that black trace goes above or goes below, that's where we're starting to kind of deviate, talking an above or a below normal flood risk. So what you don't want to see is you don't want to see that black line much above the blue line like we had last year. That's kind of sets the stage for an enhanced risk for flooding. So let's just looking at a quick example here again, just how to read this graphic. If you wanted to know at La Crosse what the chance is this year of seeing minor flood stage, just kind of follow your 12-foot line. That's the minor flood stage at La Crosse until you intersect the black line. That's their simulation for this year's conditions, and then follow that down to the lower part of the graphic, and that will give you the percent of exceeding a particular river stage. So for the Mississippi River at La Crosse, we're looking at right around a 32% chance this year, which is below normal. We usually see around a 49% chance of exceeding minor flood stage for the Mississippi River at La Crosse. So in summary, the overall snowmelt flood risk is currently near normal, except for those couple of spots that we discussed over northeast Iowa and southwest Wisconsin. And again, thanks to drier conditions during the late summer and autumn of 2020, and those continued into this winter. Limited snowpack, so really no enhanced risk, especially kind of along I-90 and areas to the north. for spring snowmelt flooding. Near normal soil moisture, so that's good, and shallow frost depth this year. One item I wanted to touch on here is the ice jam potential. We did have those cold below normal temperatures for the first half of February, and that did increase the ice cover and thickness on area rivers. So that we're watching that closely. There could be an increased chance for that. However, with the slower melt that we're currently experiencing, I like to call this an ideal melt. We warm up above freezing during the day, and then at night we freeze things back up again. So that could reduce the risk for ice jams, but we'll have to watch temperature trends closely this spring. Also, looking at some latest indications from the model runs, it looks like, this is just an FYI, it looks like we'll start getting into some river rises, most likely starting the second week in March. For areas along and north of 90. To the south, maybe a little earlier with that deeper snowpack, but you really start watching for that once we kind of get beyond about March 5th, March 7th. Kind of keep your eye out for those river rises to start. So as always, just want to throw that in there that the risk depends on future precipitation and temperature trends. So keep a close eye on things this spring.